All right, welcome everyone to today's part two webinar of the WIAT-4 Canadian series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam. I am an assessment consultant here at Pearson, been with the company for over 6 years, and I directly support a lot of our customers who often have questions about our assessments. I'm here today with my colleague Tina. Tina, if you just want to wave and say hello. She's our product manager for the WIAT. And also we have here my colleagues on the Canadian team. So we've got Mike, Emma, Liz, and Jesse who are monitoring the chat box, the Q&A. So if you guys just want to say maybe hello in the chat, that would be great. So our first webinar aimed to, I think, discuss more broadly what to expect with the upcoming WIAT-4. And since then, we've received a lot of feedback and a lot of questions. So we thought it would be a good idea to meet again and to go a little bit deeper in terms of what are the expected changes to the new WIAT-4 fourth edition. So we're going to talk a little bit about the content change and the scoring changes as well. So the agenda for today is, so we'll do a brief recap of our first webinar. So again, if you were not here for the first webinar, please do not worry. Everyone is welcome here today. I've also decided to structure this webinar by doing a deep dive into each section here. So essay comp, sentence composition, the new fluency subtests, the math updates, and then the new phonemic proficiency subtest, because those were the subtests that we had the most questions about, and it's also where there will be the most changes. Then I will pass it over to my colleague Tina, and she will talk about the different kit configurations available to help you narrow what you need to purchase if you haven't pre-ordered already. And then I will take the floor again and talk about our professional development opportunities that we have coming up. So we do have some free and some paid training options coming up in January and February. So I just wanted to mention those. And then hopefully we have a little bit of time at the end to answer questions. So that brings me to the Q&A box. So at any time, if you have any questions and also just comments, feedback, anything that you want us to know or to view or to review, please put it in the Q&A and my colleagues will either answer you directly in the Q&A section or they will flag the question for me to answer at the end of this webinar. Before we get started, I also just want to extend my ultimate excitement and enthusiasm for this new publication that's coming up. As a few of you might recall, many things in the world sort of changed a few years ago, and a lot of projects were put on hold. And many students, unfortunately, they fell behind academically. And so one of the main goals with this new edition was first and foremost to create a new norm sample or a new comparison group to have something that is better representative of students as they are today, despite all of the challenges that they've had throughout these last few years. And this is crucial, especially because the WIAT is often used to help inform a diagnosis, amongst other things too as well. So to recap on our first webinar, there are 4 new subtests with the WIAT. So that includes phonemic proficiency. And then there are 3 new fluency or timed subtests for reading and writing. These altogether, they really aim to quantify critical reading and writing skills and to tell you the story of why a student is actually struggling and where they need to focus their instruction. Because of these new subtests, we have new composite scores, 5 to be exact. And so I'll go into a little bit more details about those in just a bit. And then what has gone probably the most hype is the automated scoring for essay composition. So we have a short video and I'll chat a little bit more about that as well. We do have simplified sentence composition scoring rules. This was a subtest that I think a lot of people didn't necessarily enjoy scoring, myself included. And so there has been some really big or some improvements in terms of how to do the scoring, which I think will benefit all of you and it will be really appreciated. There is also a new dyslexia index score that is now included in the WIAT-4. So it used to be a separate purchase, but now these are included in Q Global and Q Interactive as part of your report. And if you wanted to, you could just administer those subtests to be able to get a dyslexia score for like as a risk assessment, for example. Now, how does that compare to the old version, the WIAT-3? Well, these changes primarily affect the norms, the scoring, and the number of subtests that are now included. So as you can see in this chart, the age range is exactly the same. So it's still 4 to age 50, so pretty big age range there. Obviously, the publication date is different. So we've got the WIAT-3, which was published in 2010. 14 years ago, and now we've got the new WIAT-4 publishing this year, this fall, in very, very soon, actually. um, Now, the administration, we still offer many different options, including your traditional print, but also digital options for scoring, as in Q Global, and also a fully digital option for those of you who have iPads who want to use Q Interactive. The scoring is also done on Q Global or Q Interactive or by hand. There is the automated scoring for the essay. And then the number of subtests also has changed. So it used to be a total of 16 subtests. The WIAT now has a total of 19 subtests. And realistically, we do understand that it's not feasible to actually administer all 19 subtests, of course. But it's really nice to have that flexibility to choose the subtest that you want based on the client referral or the presenting problems. And so I'll go into a little bit more details about that in a second as well. The composite scores. So furthermore, the new subtest configuration has 5 new reading and writing composites. And if I could ask one of my colleagues who are monitoring the Q&A section, if they could please share our wonderful flyer that we have on our webpage, which shows the subtests that go into which composites, that would be great. Thank you in advance. There's also some new clinical studies that were done for academically gifted, mild intellectual disability, and SLD, which provides further evidence in terms of the clinical utility of the WIAT. And then finally, the technical manual does go over a validity study that was done with the WISC-5 Canadian. The WIAT is an incredibly comprehensive academic assessment tool. It is a level B tool. And so it is used by many different types of professionals. And for this reason, we do see different uses of the WIAT throughout all of Canada. So this includes identifying patterns of strengths and weaknesses, supporting educational placements, vocational training, and college readiness decision-making. It also supports instructional planning and tracking of academic growth through progress monitoring, thanks to the use of growth scale values, GSVs. And it can also be used in research. And it is also used to help funnel through those students that require additional support by doing dyslexia screening. So if you're looking at a way to reduce your wait lists for your assessments, this is a great way to make use of the WIAT by doing just the subtests that are related to the dyslexia screening index. Some of you might be visual learners, I am, and so I do like to post this, which is what the graphical profiles now look like on the WIAT-4. So one thing that you'll probably notice right away is right here at the top left. I know it's a little bit small, but you'll notice that the total achievement composite score, well, it used to be 14 to 16 subtests, depending on the grade. Now it's just 8. So more on that in just a second. And then over here on the second page, you can see the new composite scores visually. So you can see here that basic reading is now new only because we've added the phonemic proficiency subtests as well as the pseudo word and word reading. The new reading fluency subtest is made possible because we've got some great new fluency subtests, orthographic and decoding fluency. Writing fluency is a new composite because of the sentence writing fluency. phonological processing. So this is a completely new composite score on the WIAT. We can do this because we have phonemic proficiency and we make use of the old pseudo word decoding subtest as well. And then we have orthographic processing, which includes orthographic fluency in spelling. And then finally, at the very end here, you've got your dyslexia index scores, which is made possible because of the new phonemic proficiency subtest, as well as the orthographic fluency subtest. So that is a quick visual representation of what it looks like. The other thing that I like to show to customers is that, as you can see in this chart here, table 1.4 from the manual, 8 of the 19 WIAT-4 subtests, they're grouped together to make the core composite for reading, writing, and math. So depending on the age, you could use as little as 3 or up to 6 subtests in order to get a total achievement score. So these subtests correspond specifically to the areas of specific learning disability identification specified by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And if you compare that to the third edition, a total achievement score had more subtests, and it roughly took about an hour to an hour and a half to do. Whereas with this new edition, the total achievement score can be obtained in less than an hour. But of course, the other supplemental subtests offered in the WIAT, I believe, are still super crucial. They do provide a better understanding in terms of someone's strengths and weaknesses. And furthermore, they provide a more complete picture of their academic learning profile. So generally speaking, I will say that if you're doing a comprehensive evaluation, most people will likely do the total achievement battery, but they'll also include oral language, which includes your listening comprehension and oral expression subtests. And of course, any other subtests too, depending on what the referral is and what the presented problems are. I also want to do a quick plug that the manual now has a really good section that talks about recommended subtests or areas that you can test depending on the referral type. Things like reading difficulties, writing difficulties, and math difficulties. As all of you might know, these are very complex things to measure, and there's a lot of different aspects of the self that can affect these different areas, academic areas. And so there's recommendations there in terms of testing executive functions or memory and things like that. So I highly recommend to take a look at those. All right, so that was my quick recap of the first webinar. So now we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into each of the new changes. And so we're going to start off with the essay comp because it was the subtest that we had the most questions about. And so I did want to start with that one. So I will go ahead and play this video and continue talking as you watch this. So this is a demonstration of how the automated scoring works using Q Interactive in this case. So Q Global is very similar. If you use that platform, that's fine. You would still go to your examinee and type in the essay as you're seeing right now, and it would produce a score. One thing to remember, though, is that in the new essay scoring format, the student still requires to write their essay in a response booklet. So that is really important to know. What the examiner does is then they transcribe that essay exactly as it is written from the response booklet into the scoring program. Then the scoring program will do its magic and then spit out a score for you. So for those of you who prefer to mark their essays by hand with the dots and the carets, manual scoring is, dare I say, still available. So again, for your visual learners, you can see on the left side what the scoring sheet would look like for essay comp. So a couple big changes. Number one, the scaled score is now based solely and specifically on the correct and incorrect word sequence, formerly known as grammar and mechanics. So that used to be the optional score. Now it is the mandatory and the only score that you will get using essay comp. Now, the reason for this significant change, it's entirely based on many different factors, but mostly on research findings. So correct and incorrect word sequence is the best predictor of challenges with writing fluency, which is a substantial component of learning disabilities related to writing. And it should also be noted that this is different from writing quality or writing productivity, which is now measured qualitatively via the rest of the WIAT scoring form here. So you have different elements like the use of introduction or conclusion, the use of writing the reasons why. So these aspects can be measured quantitatively here, and if necessary, other writing subtests from other tests like the KTEA3, for example, could provide additional information if you want to go that route. All other essay content is now part of the qualitative analysis. So personally, I would still complete this section each time, as I think it really does help paint a full picture in terms of the examinee's writing skills. And both the score and the qualitative info can be discussed in your clinician report when you provide your feedback. Word count and the content and organization is no longer included. So these essay components were said to not be as clinically useful, at least in terms of what is meant to be measured by this subtest specifically. Some of the benefits is that it is now very clinically sensitive to learning disability, giftedness, and others. It's also a very robust and highly reliable measure. It's sensitive to change over time and sensitive to developmental trends across grades and age, and it is supported by research. And of course, the optional automated scoring is available. Now, one way to conceptualize what this subtest actually measures is by thinking about what happens when a student measures poorly on this subtest. So when someone is having trouble on essay comp, it suggests difficulty with discourse level text writing fluency, which may be related to weakness in transcription skills and oral language abilities. Again, this is a complex skill, so there are different things that can affect the skills, including their vocabulary, morphological, and syntactic knowledge, to provide some examples. Another way to think about it is what does it measure versus what does it not measure? So what this subtest does measure is grammar and syntax, written mechanics, spontaneous expository writing with a brief time limit. So it's still 10 minutes to write about your favorite game, so that has not changed. What it does not measure, however, is cohesion, creativity, text organization, and sense of audience. And for those of you who might be new to the WIAT, so first of all, what is a correct word sequence? So a correct word sequence is two adjacent words with no grammar, mechanics, or semantic errors. So it used to be marked as with a dot when you were hand scoring. And an incorrect word sequence is marked as an error with a little caret on your scoring sheet. So here are the frequently asked questions that we got about essay composition. Can I still choose to hand score the essays? So I did answer this one already. Yes, for paper and pencil customers without access to Q Global and Q Interactive, you can still hand score your essay using the scoring rules provided in the manual. Second question, if I use the automated scoring system, how do I transcribe letter reversals? So this is a great question. So a reminder that we do not penalize reversals for scoring. So you would actually type those letters in normally. How do I transcribe illegible words? So these words should be clarified following the guidelines provided in the manual. So it is helpful to briefly look at the essay and try to see if there are any words that you cannot read or you need to clarify on before you actually go into the scoring. Number 4, why do examinees handwrite instead of type their essays? So this is a very interesting question. So typing is a skill that not all examinees have acquired. So you got to remember we're testing individuals who are very young all the way up to age 50, right? So under time conditions, you could probably expect that those who are really good at typing might be able to produce a higher score on their essay, whereas people who have trouble with typing on a computer would score not as well. And so as well as that, many students, especially in the earlier grades, they still handwrite their essays in school. So this method we thought was more ecologically valid. There might come a day where everyone uh, types their essays on a computer, and at that point, we'll probably reconsider this change, but that is for now. How does your scoring system score the essay? So again, a really interesting question. So our scoring system is called the IEA. I'll invite anyone from one of my colleagues in the chat, if you know what the acronym stands for, to put it in that chat, because I actually forgot. But this scoring engine, what it does is it assesses the grammar and syntax and the mechanics of the transcribed essay. So we actually trained the scoring system with a whole bunch of hand-scored essays that were scored by humans. And so what ends up happening is when you transcribe the student's essay to the scoring software, it's comparing that essay to a very large database and then providing a score based in part of that similarity between that essay and the training set. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Can the scoring system score a very unusual or very brief essay? So here's what we would say about this, is that examiners should definitely not attempt to score an essay that is written in a language other than English. So this is pretty obvious, but also any incomprehensible essays. So essays that have an extremely high number of severely misspelled words, or essays that are completely off topic. So for example, if the examinee didn't even follow the instructions clearly. Essays still have to have a minimum word count of 30. It is, however, recommended that they have at least 40 words if possible. And then the final question for essay comp is, why does theme development and text organization no longer have a score? So again, a really interesting question. So kind of saying what I mentioned earlier. So by simplifying this subtest to the correct and incorrect word sequence, it does allow us to improve on the clinical utility, but more specifically, the specificity of this subtest. So again, correct and incorrect word sequence highly correlates with overall writing skills, and it is highly clinically sensitive. That said, I do understand that psychologists especially might still want to fill out the new qualitative section on the essay quality to help inform their decisions about learning disorders. And if you do absolutely need a standard score for things, for different writing elements, then you can always pull subtests from a different battery. We have lots on the KTEA3, for example, that does a really good job, or other measures as well. So now this takes me to sentence composition, the next one. So the highlights of the change for this. So number one, it's now a 2-point scoring instead of 3 points. So it used to be that you would score 0, 1 or 2, 1, 0 in each of these areas. So this new change, I believe, makes it, I think, more straightforward and just an easier time to score. So for example, you can see here in the picture that semantics, it's either a 0 or 1. So they either have it or don't. The grammar is 0 or 1. Same with capitalization, the end punctuation, and the internal punctuation. So a little bit change conceptually, but also the scoring itself is dichotomous. The sentence building is now administered first. So this is a nice change that I think was partly due with some of the customer feedback that we received. A little bit more on that in just a second. Number 3, we've added a new demo item to each of the writing tasks. And number 4, the first item is now a teaching item for sentence building. So these two changes that I just mentioned, they were really made to help the client better understand the task at hand, to ensure that they know exactly what they need to do before they actually go into the items that count. And then finally, the discontinue rule has also changed from requiring a score of 0 on the first two items to a score of 0 as a result of failing a prerequisite on any of the two consecutive items. So what that does is that it just helps prevent unnecessary frustration for the client, but especially for those who are in younger grades or just writing or having challenges with writing. It is also important to note, and I got this stat from our research team, that over 85% of our examiners who participated in our standardization did find that this subtest was easy to follow, easy to use, easy to score. And so we feel like this is a really good improvement, and I hope that you all enjoy it as well. Now, one way to think about what this subtest measures is understanding what it means when someone scores poorly on the subtest. So what this means is that someone has challenges with sentence writing quality. It is not uncommon to have some variability between these two tasks. So it's always important to take a look at that variability and report on it because it does make interesting sort of conclusions in the end. There's also an error analysis section that I recommend, which identifies relative weaknesses in the semantics, grammar, and mechanics. So some of the frequently asked questions I got about sentence composition is, number one, why is the administration order changed for sentence combining and sentence building? So yes, it was based on customer feedback, but also it was mainly changed because it does help with the rapport, since sentence building is typically easier, or at least perceived as being easier by the client that you're testing, because they're not limited in terms of what words they can use to build a sentence, right? They're just given a target word and told to write any sentence that they want. Whereas with sentence combining, you're kind of restricted in terms of how can I put these two sentences together. And so generally speaking, people have an easier time with sentence building. So by doing that one first, it kind of leads them up in terms of difficulty. Another question that we get often is the start point the same for all ages and grades? So you may have actually seen in my screenshot um, in the page before. So yes, the start point is the same for all ages. However, the discontinue rule was modified so that the younger kids are not discouraged when they can't complete the subtest fully. Why is the first item now a teaching item? Pretty straightforward. This is just, again, to ensure that the examinee really understands the task. And also it was part of that customer feedback that we received. I think it's a nice welcome change. Another question that we get often is, are there any changes to the actual words in sentence composition and sentence building? So yes, although in this webinar, I can't go into specifics, we did receive a lot of feedback on some of the words, and so those words have been changed. And if any of you have used US WIAT-4, because some of you should have access to it in Q Interactive, those words will match those words that we have on the WIAT-4 US, so no major changes there. So that brings me to the new fluency subtests. So there are 3 new fluency subtests. 2 of them are for writing, one of them is for, sorry, 2 of them are for reading, one of them is for writing. And these fluency subtests, they're meant to complement the untimed counterparts. So for example, orthographic fluency, the untimed version of that subtest is word reading. And then decoding fluency, the untimed version of this subtest would be pseudo-word decoding. It's important to, when you're measuring these particular skills, not only to measure if someone can get to the right answer, but can they do it efficiently or proficiently? So this is what these subtests will do. So for orthographic fluency, we're looking at word reading fluency, specifically with irregular words. And then with decoding fluency, we're looking at pseudo word reading fluency, so made up words. So they're not real words, but they follow regular decoding rules. And you do typically, or we would recommend to actually administer both the time and untime versions of that test if you have time to do that, but they are not required for your total achievement score. And then for the writing fluency subtest, it's called sentence writing fluency. So in this subtest, they have many items in which the person writes as many sentences as they can under 5 minutes. So the untimed version of the subtest is probably most closely related to sentence building. Scoring is done post-administration. You don't penalize for spelling, capitalization, punctuation, or poor handwriting, or letter formation. Each item is actually scored on the number of words that are written. So you would give them a 0, 1, or 2 points. Whether they've used the target word, this would be scored as a 0 or 1. And whether they've used a subject-verb agreement, this is scored as either a 0 or 2 for a total of 5 scores per item. Okay, so some of the questions we got about this is why did we end up adding these fluency subtests to the WIAT? So again, there's this overall theme that you see with the new WIAT, which is measuring this proficiency aspect. So does the person have the skill and can they do it proficiently? So the fluency subtests are really meant to tackle that piece, that proficiency piece. So orthographic fluency, in a way, measures specifically sight vocabulary. So those who are good in sight vocabulary often are better in comprehension because they don't have to spend so much time thinking about the words that they're reading. So it provides a little bit more mental resources to focus on comprehension. So super important to measure. The decoding fluency measures phonic decoding proficiency. So again, this idea of accuracy versus efficiency. And then the sentence writing fluency will measure ideation fluency, sentence integrity, grammar, lexical knowledge, again, looking at the efficiency piece. Why are irregular words used in the orthographic fluency? So irregular words are words that don't follow regular grapheme to phoneme correspondence rules. So for example, 2 words would be door versus cat. So door spelled D-O-O-R, cat spelled C-A-T. Someone who is new to the English language, they might have an easier time reading the word cat because it does follow grapheme to phoneme correspondence. Equals cat, whereas door is D is da, u, r would sound like door, but that's not right. The actual word is, when you say it, is door. And so what this allows you to do is to measure one's ability to recognize words from memory rather than use decoding skills. When should you include the fluency subtest in your test battery? Whenever you can, whenever you have time, of course, but specifically, if you have referrals where someone shows phonic decoding weaknesses, you're definitely going to want to use some of the fluency subtests. If they have weaknesses with word recognition, or if they have suspected dyslexia, if they have challenges with spelling, or challenges with low production or poor writing fluency. These are all examples that you could integrate these fluency subtests. Again, it all depends on the client that is in front of you and what presenting problems that they have. Okay, next one is the math subtests changes. Now, the math subtests actually have the greatest number of changes to any subtests. However, these changes do not affect administration and scoring. And in fact, most of those changes were already done on the WIAT-3, especially the Canadianization of items. So those have not changed. So I'll just run through these ones really quickly. So for example, when we talk about the Canadianization, we mean that the imperial units have changed to metric. We've also changed items in the numerical operations subtest to reflect Canadian content in the Canadian curriculum. The word digit digit is used instead of number. We do use Canadian currency. And then there's also minor wording changes to problems to reflect Canadian terminology. This subtest, I think, was where we got the most questions that were item specific, as in, is this item still there? Has this item been changed? So again, because of the nature of this webinar and because it's being recorded, I can't get into too many specifics, but I do my best here in the slides. So one of the questions we get often is, are there still questions about coins and bills? And what about those pennies? So yes, we definitely have some items that still have coins and bills. We use Canadian currency. However, I'm super happy to say that the pennies are no longer there. So that is because in Canada, we don't really use pennies. And so we've made that change on our tests. Another question that we get often is the analog clock still a math question? So yes, it is still there, but fortunately it is only one item that is related to that specific skill. Is the 5-6 item change? So yeah, this is one of those items where if you know, you know, right? So the 5-6 question was really, really hard for examiners to say. And yes, this item has changed. We replaced it with something that's not so much of a tongue twister. Another question that we get is, what about the rows of desks? So if you remember that desk question where there were lots of desks and the examiner said desks a lot, yes, that has been removed and it has been changed. Have the administration rules, instruction scoring, or items changed? So yes, minor changes, even when we compare the third to the fourth edition. So for example, like we've got items that have been dropped, items that have been added, some minor modifications to the wording. A lot of the items were actually reordered based on difficulty. In the numerical operations subtest, the start points were simplified. One subtest that did not change at all is the math fluency subtest for addition, subtraction, and multiplication. Okay, deep dive phonemic proficiency. So this is the last section before I hand it off to Tina. So the phonemic proficiency, in my humble opinion, is the greatest addition to this new WIAT test. The entire subtest takes about 13 minutes to administer. The subtest measures development of phonological phonemic skills, where examinees will respond orally to items that require the manipulation of sounds and words. So there's 3 tasks that are involved: elision, which is about the removal of specific parts of words; substitution, where you substitute a part of a word to make up a new word; and then reversal, which is the last piece, where you reverse the word to make a new word. So the examples I have listed here are for the elision: say classroom, now say classroom, but don't say class, room. Then you do it with smaller parts of words, say lake, but don't say l. With substitution, an example would be say prize. Now say prize, but change the p to a t sound. You do it with the initial, the final, and the middle sound. And then for reversals, an example would be say spill. Now say spill backwards. Lips. So according to research, students need this phonemic skill and the ability to use these skills instantly to be a skilled reader. So this new subtest allows you to capture both the accuracy and the efficiency, and may shed light into the why a student is struggling. One thing that I've added here is the error analysis, which I think is really important. So it's a quick chart that, if you're using Q Interactive, is automatically filled for you. If you're doing traditional print, then you would manually fill this out. But what this does is it allows you to determine which of these skills a student is struggling with and whether they struggle with the accuracy, the fluency, or both. The error analysis goal statements are also included in your report when you generate it in Q Global and Q Interactive. So generally speaking, a high number of non-instant responses which suggests skills that are not yet proficient, and a high number of 0-point responses, which suggests underdeveloped skills. Some of the frequently asked questions that I get with this is, does the examiner read each word themselves? No. So we're excited to report that this subtest has audio files. So if you're using Q Interactive, it's embedded within the app. You just play the audio directly from the application. If you're using Q Global or you're using traditional print, you can download the files and play them from your device. And having these pre-recorded tests means that you don't have to worry about mispronouncing any of the words, which adds, I think, a lot more reliability and removes some of the stress to the examiner. Does this subtest replace the need to use other tools to measure phonological awareness? So my answer to this is maybe, right? So research shows that phonemic proficiency skills are key to orthographic mapping, which in turn is essential to fluent word reading. And if you pair this subtest with pseudo word reading, you have a really good, reliable estimate of phonological awareness. However, some clinicians might want to go beyond those. So one thing that the WIAT does not measure, for example, would be rapid automation. So if that is something that you would like to have a score for, you will need to pull from other measures. I'm just going to say it out loud. The KTEA has a really good rapid automation subtest that you can use. Number 3, is this subtest available for all ages? Okay, so this was a leading question that works in my favor because the answer is yes. The phonemic proficiency subtest is available for all ages up to ages 51. So this is actually incredibly rare to see in phonological awareness tests in general. And so I think it really speaks to some of the benefits of going with the WIAT. Does the examiner provide corrective feedback to the examinee? So yes, corrective feedback is provided on all of the items to support task comprehension for what would be a novel task for a lot of these examinees. All right, so I'm going to hand it off to Tina, who will talk about the kit configurations and Q Global digital components. Go ahead, Tina.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today, and I'll echo Sam's welcome here on our WIAT-4 Canadian webinar. As the product manager for WIAT-4 Canadian, it's my responsibility to put the kits together with the help of our sales team as consultants. And so Sam and his team, of course, have been active in creating these kits just for what hopefully you all need. So there are 3 kits available for the WIAT-4 Canadian, and there'll be a 4th kit as well that I'll talk about in a little bit, but 3 main kits for the main products. There's a kit that's mostly print plus some digital where needed, and I'll talk about those details in a minute. There's that same kit with a scoring subscription for 1 year, and then there's a primarily digital kit with a scoring subscription for 1 year. So if Sam, you can go to the next slide, let me drill into those just real quickly. And then I want to take you into Q Global just for a couple minutes if you're not familiar with the resource library to show you where you get some of these components. One of the biggest issues is the technical manual is huge. And so for most of us, as we're moving around our work from day to day and traveling, there's a lot of pages to print in that manual that has all the norms in it. So what we decided to do is make that a digital first manual just for your ease of use, as well as for the way that you use it and need to look up things on any given day. So this first kit, this is primarily a print kit. What isn't in print is the one technical manual, which is the technical and interpretive manuals you see right in the middle of that description box. And then the audio files, because no longer is it viable really to use CD-ROMs. Most new computers don't even have a CD-ROM drive in them. So we've moved our audio files to digital only so that you can download those to your desktop and use those during an administration in a purely digital way. We're also not doing flash drives anymore. Some of you may be familiar with some of our products that in the past have used flash drives. CD-ROMs and flash drives are pieces of hardware that are not universally applicable. Flash drives can also be difficult because most new computers have encryption requirements when you plug in a USB into your computer. So we're trying to stay away from those pieces of hardware that make it harder to use our content. And so the audio files, the large interpretive manual, and then there's additional forms and profiles on Q Global that are just easier to deliver digitally only so that you don't have quite so much paper in your world. So this first kit, while it's primarily print, does have a number of digital pieces that come along with the kit on a Q Global implementation. Sam, next slide, please. The second kit is this same kit with a year of Q Global scoring, as I mentioned. So this is where if you're primarily a print user, but you want digital scoring, this is an unlimited use 1-year subscription to all the scoring that you may need. This is the kit for you. And then Sam, one more slide, please. The last slide is if you're ready or you're already mostly digital on Q Global and or Q Interactive, the Q Global kit will give you all the components on Q Global that you can use for digital presentation. If you're working remotely and doing remote administrations, you'll need this kit so that you can be as digital as possible. Now, Sam, if I can take over really quickly, I'm just going to take 2 minutes and share my screen so that I can show you, if you haven't seen, just a little bit of inside Q Global itself. So hopefully all of you can see my screen at this point. Let me just take a couple minutes. This is the home screen for Q Global. So if you haven't been here before, all you need to do is click on the resource library, see at that tab at the top. And then once we go into the resource library, we sort to WIAT-4 Canadian. So I'm just going to scroll down here. I could make a favorite and jump to this right away and not have to scroll. But certainly, I'll just use the WIAT-4 in the US right now because we're still developing the Canadian version. There's always 2 folders for every test in Q Global. One is the general folder that gives you some sample reports, a welcome letter, some guidance on using these digital assets, as we call them in the resource library, and then an about doc. Just tell us a little bit about the test that you're starting to use. Then there's the restricted folder, which gives you all of the content of the test that's available on Q Global. And you can see really the wealth of files. If you buy the digital kit, you will get all of these files. If you buy the print kit, you will get most of these files, but not all of them. So as an example, this analysis and comparisons form is useful if you want to download and print that and use that in further analysis after the administration. Here are the audio files. We absolutely recommend you download these and use them off your desktop before the administration so that you have those ready to go. If you try to use them on the web, they don't play as well and sometimes they clip. So we tell you to download those. Here's the administration manual. Here's that very large technical manual with norms. So if I open that up, it's 553 pages. So you can imagine how big that would be. Certainly there's ways to use this in all its flexibility that a digital manual gives you. And then certainly all of these manual links are hyperlinked as in the table of contents. So if I want to go to quality assurance procedures, that will take me right to that point in the manual where you may need that information. The last thing I'll show you then too is the stimulus book. If you choose to go digital with your administration and show pictures on a screen versus pictures in print, we just recommend you go to full screen, and then any of these subtests you can jump to, and there's navigation for the different items of each subtest to get you right to that information that you need at the time. So it's a really flexible way of using the Q Global Resource Library. If you're not using Q Interactive, which is another option, you can still use digital presentations in the digital asset context of Q Global. So this is just a very quick overview, again, of the general and restricted folders of the WIAT-4 Canadian that's coming here in our Q Global Resource Library. And in your handout, you'll see some screenshots that I've grabbed of these different options, and you can see all the different pieces that you can get with your digital and in part with your print and digital kits. Sam, I think that was what I wanted to share. I can turn it back to you
That's
for some
great.
wrap up on professional development.
Thanks, Tina. So if you're still with us right now, thank you so much for being here. I do want to close us off by highlighting some of the professional development opportunities that we have. So if you're looking for something a little bit more, so today we did do, sort of a quick overview of these changes, but if you want to actually sit down with the trainer to go through an actual training, we have different options, okay? So the first one, I'll actually correct myself. The first option are these free complimentary introductory training. So this is available for anyone who purchases a kit. They are similar to this webinar where we do a quick overview of the product itself. But if you're looking for something a little bit more deeper, then we do have group training offerings, which we started scheduling for January and February. So this is meant for larger groups such as school boards, or maybe you're part of a large clinical team and you want to have a dedicated trainer to either come in person or remotely to lead a 3-hour training session with your group. The other option that I really want to highlight today is our individual or small groups training. It's a per seat model. So for those of you who are not part of a larger team, we do offer a per seat model where you can reserve a single seat in a session that will be capped at 40 participants. So this is made so that the learning experience is very good and that you can interact with your peers and with the trainer as much as possible. We have 2 sessions currently. They are selling extremely fast. So if you want to have a seat to those sessions, you can head over to the WIAT-4 product page. There is a training tab. There's a QR code right here that will take you directly there. And this will allow you to add the training to your cart and then purchase that training and reserve your seat for either the January 14 or February 5th session. They are, I believe, at 1 p.m., depending on which session you have, Eastern time. So it should hopefully accommodate all of you, no matter where you are in the country. And for those of you who like to collect APA credits or NAFS credits, we do provide those as part of this training as well. The other thing that I want to mention too is we're currently working on the WIAT-4 Canadian French. So please, if you are a French examiner or you know of French examinees, you can sign up for our field research opportunity. We do compensate for both the examiner and the examinee or for referrals. If you're an examiner and you're not sure if you have examinees, that's perfectly fine. We can bring those examinees to you. And this will help us get the WIAT-4 Canadian French out because it is, I think a lot of people are waiting on it, including myself. And so, yeah, if you want to partake in that research, there's that opportunity there, and you can find that on our website. Okay, so we have about just a few minutes left, about 5 or 6 minutes. Tina, if you can maybe just cue in some questions, maybe you can go in and read some questions that you feel would be good to mention to the group. And while you find those questions, I will also say that if we don't get to your question today and you would like to chat with one of us, please schedule a call with one of your assessment consultants. So we've got Liz, who is our sales manager, Michael Sharon, Alicia, myself, and Emma, who are there to support all of you. So please reach out to us and we're happy to hop on a call with you.
Thanks, Sam. I'm going to give you a couple questions here quick in the last few minutes. Otherwise, we're really pretty caught up on the Q&A. So kudos to the team that's managing the chat box. Let's talk about essay comp just for a second. What about essays of less than 30 words? Will those not be scoreable by the software? Or what do we do with essays of less than 30 words?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Tina, but you would follow the instructions in the manual, and 30 words are actually not very valid and reliable, and so you can't actually go in and score those. But you can still use it as qualitative information for your comprehensive evaluation. Go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to echo that. I think the qualitative analysis of that and the results of that are really important from a language standpoint of the examinee, but also to note that they didn't produce enough language to make that scorable is also a result. So yes, not scorable by the software, but really look at that as a data point in your analysis and interpretation. Let me ask a next question. This is from an attendee who wanted to go back to the CTOP2 question, which I think you answered really well. Any comparison directly between those, maybe a validity study between the CTOP2 and the WIAT-4 phonemic tests?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. Um, I also think I may have heard rumbling that there's like a new CTOP kind of being in the works. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that changes over time. The WIAT, even though it has technically only like three aspects of phonemic proficiency, a lot of the tasks that you end up doing using the WIAT-4, they're embedded in all of the subtests that you would typically do from the CTOP, minus the rapid optimization subtests, which we don't have on the WIAT. So absolutely, I think the WIAT-4 can be a really good starting point. And then if you notice that someone is really struggling in this area and you would like to probe a little bit more, then that's where you can pull from other tests as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. And just so, for the questions that have come in through the chat that maybe not everyone has seen the answers to, if you look in the webinar chat, I did post some general updates on the timing of the WIAT-3 sunset, which will be far enough in the future that you don't need to worry about it immediately. And then secondly, the timing of the Q Interactive release as it stands today. So take a look in the chat so that you have those details in mind. And please know we understand the reality of your budget cycles and timing and when you're able to upgrade. So the WIAT-3 Canadian is not going away at the time of release. So it'll still be available.
Perfect. I don't know if you had any other questions, but I think that we can maybe call this a wrap for now. We will definitely, if we missed any questions, we will reach out to you. Thank you everyone for attending today. I also want to say a quick thank you to our Canadian sales team for being here today to answer questions. Tina, our product manager, thank you for being here. And most importantly, our research team who worked so hard to get this product ready for publication. Big kudos to you. It's been a long time coming, and we're so excited to finally be able to share this new edition with you. So wishing everyone a really great week ahead, and let's connect soon. Thank you so much, everyone.